Okay, I guess it's enough with the music. I don't know very well if all my decisions are correct, but I will start now with Remedios Varo. It is yeah 10 minutes past the hour that I announced. So I will start with this great Catalan painter who, for a good part of her life, lived and worked in Mexico. She also lived and worked for a short while in France. So she died at 55. So, kind of young. So she was born Maria de los Remedios Alicia Rodriga Vara Uranga in Angles, a long name, a small town in the province of Girona, Catalonia, in northern Spain in 1908. Her mother named Varo in honor of the Virgin of Los Remedios, Virgen de los Remedios, the Virgin of Remedies, after a recently deceased older sister. This is the painter. And you'll see now, so this is just an introduction to this great painter. So you'll see, and I'll comment a few paintings if you allow me to. Unfortunately, I started with some not a very good resolution. She was a surrealist painter, truly with a fantastic world, an amazing fantasy. You could, I mean, she's very individualistic in her painting. There are animals, there are strange, fantastic beings, there are buildings, kind of medieval, there is solitude, there is introversion, there is also, there are groups of people. It's truly a very special scenery, so to speak. Very interesting painter, obsessed by the clepsydra, by the hourglass, by time, by the relationship between life and death, by the relationship between what we call real and what we call the fantastic, or the so-called unreal, or the ghostly reality, which is sometimes maybe more real than the so-called real. A dreamer, no doubt, but she painted her dreams with a lot of conviction and intensity, and I think she needs to be admired. I'll arrive at better pictures than these ones. There is also a duality in her paintings, and maybe this says something about a schism within herself, a tension between two sides of herself in a way. This is the painter with two of her paintings behind her, and we'll see them more in detail. Now you see, this is probably herself with some kind of strange animal, and then a web of lines that maybe reflect her thoughts. Another, so-called strange painting where the fantastic insinuates itself within reality with great power of persuasion. And you don't know, is it a human being? Is it she's half human, half something else. And maybe all of us are somehow like this. Again, duality, duality here again. But her work is very autobiographical. Obviously, she was a woman, a painter with great inner life, with an intense introspection and living solitarily, I imagine. Now, this is a detail of a painting by her, this painting. In a way, it's a good introduction to the work of the two architects that I'm going to talk about starting in a few minutes. I mean, it is very difficult for an architect today to imagine architectures comparable in terms of their fantastic spirit to these paintings. But the surreal does insinuate itself in the work of Benedetta Tagliabue, and to an extent even in the work of Carme Pinos. And certainly in the work of them and their husband who died. They both had the same husband, but not at the same time, of course, Enric Miralles. I will talk about him too. So I hope you like Remedios Varo. I truly think she's a very, she was a very gifted painter and with a very personal worldview.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yes, yes. Somebody introduced me to her work, and I was happy that she did, because I knew nothing about this painter.
Hmm. Yeah, and in the first glance, it reminds me a little bit to Hieronymus Bosch, you know, in a way.
Yes, yes.
This plasticity, but almost like two-dimensional, the way how she sets up people in the depth of space, like very interesting. Yeah.
I like the work so much. Thanks for introducing her, Dan.
You're welcome, and of course you can study her work further. This is just you know, a sketch of an introduction.
This one is a bit spatial, very architectural in a way.
Yes, yes, no. There are other paintings of hers that are related to architecture in obvious ways.
And it's also the spiral again.
Pardon?
It's the spiral again.
Yes. But the spiral is also in her hair. I don't know why this thing, do you see this little note you are screen sharing kind of, you know, 20 centimeters from the top of the screen, and I cannot move it upwards anyway. And you have here the split, the rift, and you'll see it further in the last picture, which I show, which is very interesting. And in a way, it's about you know, the challenge of life. You know, that we have a hard time sometimes to connect, and you know, the painting does seem to say this. And then the animal, the cat, looks you know, astonished and maybe frightened a little bit at our inability to connect, maybe. Here is a mask and, you know, her profile. Then herself in a detail with, I imagine herself in a way, or her alter ego with the animal. And maybe the animal is also part of herself. And, you know, the being, you know, the being, is it a man? Is it a woman? Is, you know, considering the attire, you'd say is a woman, but looking at the face, is a man. So
it looks almost like a beekeeper.
Yeah.
It's sort of a protective hood.
And this painting is also very interesting. Again, duality, you know, the being behind the door, the being in the shadow, the being, but that being you don't quite know. The silhouette seems to be human, but it's half human, half something else. Yes, the dream world, or the world of dreams, is very present in her paintings in a very, very genuine and convincing way. And now this is the last image, which I like to comment a little bit on, because I mean, the meaning seems to be obvious. You see, the shadow has the appearance of reality, and you know, the standing being is actually the shadow. So here the shadow became real, and the real became shadowy. And maybe the dialectics between, you know, the so-called shadow, maybe the psychological shadow or the physical shadow and the so-called real or concrete. The concrete, the real, is kind of like this. We dismiss the shadow, we dismiss the other side, but the other side could have its own reality. And sometimes, like in her painting, they reverse roles. So it's kind of interesting, her painting. Maybe, again, you have a third entity or a third being peeping through the window, looking at this strange reversal in the case of this being. Now, she was a thinker, and her paintings are not, they are metaphysical, they are surreal. I think they are very interesting. Anyway, now we go to architecture. This was just
the last painting then that
pardon?
reminds me of this last painting reminds me of the Hans Christian Andersen one of his tales about the shadow, that the shadow takes over at the end.
I didn't read it. I know of him, but I didn't read it. Okay, so Carme Pinos. And here we have 500 pictures, so it will be a long presentation, but we have two major architects in Europe and in the world, and it's not easy to talk about them in just a few words. So be prepared for a kind of, I think, an exciting trip in the work of two very interesting architects. So they are both residing and working in Barcelona, and they have something else in common. They had the same husband, but again, not at the same time, of course. First, Carme Pinos was married to Eric Miralles, and then I think what happened, Benedetta Tagliabue is Italian. She was born in Milan. She studied architecture in Milan, and then she arrived in Barcelona, and I think she began to work in the office of Carme Pinos and Eric Miralles. And perhaps, I imagine, Eric Miralles fell in love with her, she fell in love with him. And so I imagine this was the cause of the separation between Carme Pinos and Eric Miralles. Their presence is almost like in the paintings of Remedios Varo, the presence of Eric Miralles in their works is almost like the ghost or the shadow in some of the paintings by Remedios Varo. They have very original works and they are theirs, but the influence of Eric Miralles somehow can still be felt, and not in a direct or oppressive or excessively deterministic way, but it is there, insinuating. Pardon? Okay. So we start with Carme Pinos. I hear a background noise. I wonder why. Now, I want to dedicate this presentation to a very interesting anthropologist, I guess, Maria Kimbutas. I don't know if you know of her, and I don't even know, and I excuse myself if I pronounce her name correctly. She was born in Lithuania or Estonia, and then she immigrated to the United States. And she wrote some very interesting books about the age of the goddess. And her claim was that before the Greek civilization, there was in Europe a matriarchal civilization that was very developed and very interesting and very articulated in the artistic field, and not just in the artistic field. So her claim was that before the patriarchal society that we know of and we are still in, so to speak, before that there was a matriarchal society that was not at all, undeveloped. And so I thought of dedicating this presentation to her because she was advocating the case of human creativity, of feminine creativity, and of matriarchy. Now, it is in a way a new phenomenon that, for example, at the University of Architecture here, where I give lectures, there are now more female students than male students. This is unique. I mean, this would not have happened just not too many years ago. And I think this is happening everywhere in the world. If you see an exhibition with, let's say, I saw in Vienna with Otto Wagner, or pictures of his studio, there were only males, only male architects. In Frank Lloyd Wright's office, there was a remarkable woman who was an architect, but she was living in the shadow of Frank Lloyd Wright, and later on in the shadow of her husband, Marion Griffiths. What I'm saying is that the world is changing, no doubt. Now we have the feminine side of the story being told with inspiration, with talent, with force, with conviction. And this is a phenomenon which I think will increase. So that we have now in Barcelona, probably the most important architects in Barcelona are these two women at this point. This would not have been imaginable, not even a big number of years before us, because, you know, in the past, you know, the lady, the woman, the wife lived in the shadow of the man, but this is not the case any longer. And I'm actually happy that this is not the case any longer. Okay, Carme Pinos. This is the architect. And she builds in many places, not just in Catalonia or Barcelona. She builds in Mexico, she builds in Vienna. She's very accomplished, and you can tell she's an intense lady. This is her website. It's in a way sad because, you know, she was married first to Eric Miralles, and now her website only has her name, Carme Pinos, while Benedetta still keeps the name, including the name of Eric Miralles. So anyway, quite a good architect, and we'll see soon that it is so. So we don't have any longer the case with, you know, it's known that the two wives of Alvar Aalto had an influence on the design and had participated probably actively in the development of the projects. But the author was always Alvar Aalto, you know, and his wives, although they were architects, they were just his wives. But this is not the case any longer. And it's so strikingly obvious because these ladies developed even further, and in fact, almost exponentially after the death of their husband. We'll come back to this. I'm just beginning with a few images of her work, and then we'll enter in detail and analyze some of her buildings. Now, on the other hand, it is sometimes a little difficult to evaluate correctly what is the extent to which Eric Miralles was present, because some of the projects initiated with them working together for a competition which they won, and then after his death, the competition became the result of the competition which they won became a real building. So it's a complicated situation, but nevertheless, with the exception of some buildings that both of them initiated and built after his death, some of the buildings from the beginning of the career have Eric somehow present there in some form. We'll come here because she's also a designer. We'll return to this. In fact, I should. Maybe I should get rid of this, kind of passive introduction to her work. So a few images now with her. Here she is with Eric Miralles. And in the back, you see the drawing for a very important work, a cemetery near Barcelona, and we'll look at it in detail. And I actually think it's for contemporary architecture probably almost as important as the Brion Cemetery by Carlos Carpa, in a different way, but it's a very important, although a modest work, but I think very, very important. So they were very young. They won the competition and they built it. I'm talking about a Igualada cemetery near Barcelona, actually. This is her sketch. All her projects have this ideogram or this graphic representation of the essence of a project. So it could be easily identified in this way. I don't know, exactly what her role was in the project, but obviously she was one of the authors. So as part of a competition to replace an older cemetery, Enric Miralles and Carme Pinos envisioned a new type of cemetery that began to consider those that they were laid to rest, as well as the families that still remained. After 10 years of construction, the Igualada cemetery outside of Barcelona, Catalonia, Spain, was completed in 1994 as a place of reflection and memories. Now, it is not any cemetery. I mean, a cemetery cannot accept easily, the adjective, as being pleasant. A cemetery is a cemetery, but this one is particularly, how to describe it? It could be seen as being desolate or disheartening, because it's very. There is no intention at all to embellish anything and to generate any kind of illusion. But I think it's telling the truth, and I think it is telling the truth about the phenomenon of death. And paradoxically, for me at least, the effect is that it amplifies my desire to live. So the Igualada Cemetery is a project that challenges the traditional notions of what makes a cemetery. Miralles and Pinos conceptualize the poetic ideas of a cemetery for the visitors to begin to understand and accept the cycle of life as a link between the past, the present, and the future. It's understood by the architect to be a city of the dead, where the dead and the living are brought closer together in spirit. As much as the Igualada Cemetery is a place for those to be laid to rest, it is a place for those to come and reflect in the solitude and serenity of the Catalonian landscape. Well, it is something in between architecture and landscape, or landscape architecture, and maybe it should be so. There is I mean, again, this is not a space for sweet illusions at all. But it would be wrong, I think, to describe architecturally, the end of life in such terms. What I like about it is that it is a narrative architecture, but expressed in a symbolic and abstract way, and it uses very, so-called common material, almost industrial. Some of them, they were not afraid of rust. They were not afraid of, so-called banal steel mesh that is rusted as well. The stones are placed, with their roughness. There is no intention at all to beautify anything, and I think this is a merit of the work. And this is the plan. You can see it's almost like a human silhouette, somehow approximated is, I think, is a very courageous and poetical work. And I'm very happy and surprised that, you know, they were able to build something like this. I actually met Eric Miralles. I was in New York at that time, and he gave a lecture at Storefront for Art and Architecture, which was and still is an interesting architecture gallery. And I remember I asked him, because he said this was 1 or 2 years before he died. He died at 40 or 45, died young. And he said that in Spain, that's what he said, there isn't an interest in verticality in architecture, that most architectures are horizontal. And I remember I asked him, well, what about Sagrada Familia? And he said, yes, but it is an exception. Now, since that time, this was in 1990, something I forgot, 1994, 1993, around 1990. Since then, some tall buildings popped up in Barcelona and Madrid and other places. So Spain is not quite the same any longer, but maybe he was right, at least for that time, or for the time preceding that time. But there are sophisticated architectural so-called details here, as you can see on the left. You know, this is not, it's not just a banal, you know, concrete wall. You know, it has architectural interest. And I love this picture. Is, you know, with simple means, it's, I think, very poetical, and it's very suggestive of what is happening here. You know, it's. I think this is architecture at its best for our modernity. It is, and it shows that it's possible to do with simple means really a lot. If the imagination uses these materials in creative ways, and this, I mean, this is a meditation about death and about life, about the cycle, life, death. So it is a work that is symbolic. It is metaphoric. It transcends, you know, the simplicity of linear reading or interpretation. There is this array. Now, I don't know, you know, it just happened that Miralles died young, but it's almost as if he had some kind of premonition, I guess. I don't know. It is obvious to me, though, that they were very concerned about the cemetery, and they did a very original work. Now, we will see now another work which is also very interesting. In 1992, in Barcelona for the Olympic Village. So they work together, Carme, Pinos, and Eric Miralles, and this is very sculptural and you know, almost. I mean, there is some anxiety here. I'm amazed at the city of Barcelona, especially for such a luminous program like the Olympics, build something like this. But it only shows the openness of the city and also the courage of the architects. Now, of course, the functionalists could criticize this work, but no one could dismiss the fact that it has artistic power and that you know, it has presence. although he died young, he had an influence on even younger architects. I know that Hernan Diaz Alonso, who now runs is the dean or the director of SciArc in Los Angeles, he also worked in the office of Eric Miralles, and I know other interesting architects who worked there. So he had an impact on architecture, although he died young. I mean, he was not really a deconstructivist like those seven that around that time, 1992, had the exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art. I'm talking about Rem Koolhaas, Wolf Prix, or Kop Himmelblau, because he was with his partner Zaha Hadid, Daniel Lipskind, Frank Gehry, Bernard Tschumi, and I always forget the seventh. Anyway, he's different. Although there is fragmentation in his work, and you could somehow associate his work or their work with deconstruction, but it's something else. Now we see this is done by Carme Pinos. Maybe the project was initiated by her and him, but it was finalized by her. You can see there is a certain difference. I think Eric Miralles brought in some expressionism in a way in the work that is a little bit more tempered in her work. But you can still see even here at the bottom, you know, this, it's a destabilizing that takes place here. And we can talk about this, you know, what does it mean to destabilize architecture? Well, we saw it at the cemetery, we saw it in the Olympic Village, and we see it here. It's like a moment of crisis in the life of architecture, which was meant traditionally to express, you know, stability. But we have now architects, and there are others, of course, who challenge the traditional notions in architecture with instability, and we could very well start a discussion. Why the need for destabilizing, you know, what was traditionally supposed to express stability? If you're so kind to hear a background noise, I think a microphone is functioning, and maybe it would be better if it isn't. Now look at this drawing. Now I don't know, it was done by Carme Pinos, it was done by Eric Miralles, it was done by both. Hello? But it's very interesting, the drawing. It's almost like, I mean, just by itself, the drawing is so abstract, and you know, it's almost like some kind of avant-garde musical notation. Now, this is you know, some kind of a landscape that she did without Eric Miralles. Again, you see this I don't know how to call it. It's an ideogram, or you know, this graphic, quick, or maybe not so quick. Maybe it is elaborated, but it tries to express the graphic conceptualization of the project. So here now you see a picture of her opening summer show at Bartlett in London. I envy these exhibitions at Bartlett and the AA, you know, and I wish other schools of architecture would have similar exhibitions, but I guess this is not easily realizable, although it should be a desideratum. Obviously, she is highly regarded if she, was invited to open this exhibition in London. Okay, master plan for the historic center of Saint-Dizier in France. I guess I didn't find images for this project. I just, anyway, I should investigate further. Now, there is the campus in Vienna. She did build this building for the University of Economics and Business. And it just happens that it's next to the big library by Zaha Hadid. Across the plaza, there is a building by Peter Cook. So there are three important architects there, one near the other. But this is the building by Carme Pinos. It's very different, of course, than Zaha's building. It's less spectacular, but I think in terms of architectural quality, is not at all inferior to that building. The one by Peter Cook on the left, and I don't think I have images here with the one by Peter Cook, is a little more extravagant. It's orange. It has some wooden pieces of wood covering the facade. It's a strange building. But the one by Carme Pinos is very convincing. And it has subtlety. You can see the building by Zaha on the right, the big cantilever part, which I visited a few times, and I can tell you that yes, the students were very impressed, and yes, the spatial arrangement inside is perhaps impressive, but there is a but, and I have admiration about Zaha Hadid, but I think that building has a problem. It's excessively white inside, and it doesn't say I'm a library. In fact, it could be anything. Even something dedicated to sport, and it has an interior which is, I think, deprived of that minimum of narration which probably a library should convey. But it's still an impressive building because it is, approximately extravagant. And even here, you see on the right side, the sloping facade that belongs to Zaha, and then the buildings occupying almost the whole picture belong to Carme Pinos. Now, yesterday, Florian suggested I talk about Lina Bobardi, and I'm actually prepared. I could do it, if we have the time, and maybe we do. And I remember I discovered on the web a poster with Lina Bobardi, and on the right, so the poster was divided in two equal halves, and the left half belonged to Lina Bobardi, and the right half belonged to Zaha Hadid. Now here you have Carme Pinos and Zaha Hadid, not necessarily in this picture, but they are next to each other. I guess it's not so easy to share a poster in equal terms with Zaha Hadid, with the Dame Zaha Hadid, with Dame Zaha Hadid. I imagine there is some kind of competition between Carme Pinos and Benedetta Tagliabue. I mean, it is impossible not to have some declared or undeclared, competitive, even drama there, because they are in the same city. They're both married to Eric Miralles. They are both architects. They both build, and maybe in this context creates that tension that makes them even more creative and more ambitious to assert themselves. And we'll see a few buildings that, like a market that Carme Pinos built, and then a market that Benedetta Tagliabue built. So you almost have the same program, but addressed differently and expressed differently architecturally. So I imagine, yes, I mean, Barcelona is a big city, but still, it's a special situation. And I really imagine that sooner or later a book will be published, if it wasn't already, about this strange, arrangement or triangle. The book could be very easily called Carme, Eric, Benedetta, or I don't know. I don't know of any other case in the history of architecture, something like this. Three highly celebrated architects sharing also their lives for some time. It's an interesting. Anyway, here you see the three buildings that I told you about. You can see the big library by Zaha here. You see here the building or buildings by Peter Cook, and here Carme Pinos. They are all three large buildings and in a prestigious location in Vienna, in part of the university. And I think Carme Pinos will also build another building, and I have the project here. Also, if you visit Vienna, here on the left side in the picture is also an excellent building. I don't know who the architect was, but it's very well done. So Zaha Hadid is in between these two buildings. Zaha. So the building I said a few words about is this one, and covered in curtain. But it has now another part which is very almost spectacular, also covered in curtain, and is not shown in this picture. Now, Cube One Tower in Guadalajara, Mexico. You see, Mexico, Mexico, the way it's described by Hollywood or by the President of the United States is not the Mexico that I visited once. I only went to Acapulco for a short vacation, so it was a superficial trip in a way. But I can tell for sure the way Mexico is represented in the United States is not correct. I met very proud people, very sophisticated, speaking English very well, and very proud of their culture. And they have achievements that should be known. And Guadalajara invited some very important architects to build there, and she's one of them. So again, the way Mexicans and Mexico are portrayed in Hollywood movies doesn't do justice at all to the country and to the people from there. No. Okay, so this is the building, Cube One, but she built two. You'll see the cube, so-called cube. The second one, this one is more cubical, but the second one is much taller. But it is architecture, clearly, with maybe a capital A, or maybe without a maybe. Bravo to her, and bravo to the people in Guadalajara who commissioned her. Now, this project was done by her alone. She was not any longer married to Eric Miralles. I don't know if he was alive when she did this project, but this is her work entirely. Sometimes inside her work, like you will see the latest project that I show in this presentation, which is a building for the headquarters of the Catalan government. Outside it's very interesting and very convincing, but inside at times is a little bit kind of conventional. anyway, that's why I didn't even choose for that particular project pictures from the east side. But she's very creative, when it comes to the exterior of the building, and the way she manipulates volumes, and the way she distributes the functions and the materials she uses. You see, even the facade has this um, almost like a mask, a veil. It's a veiled facade, and she has this also in Vienna. I didn't have pictures with that, and I should have, because yes, it's almost like a second facade, a veil that covers, the constructive or constructed facade, and that veil is very effective. Of course, there are many architects who use the veil, but I think the theme of the veil in architecture is a very interesting one, and perhaps we should talk about this. Maybe dedicate a day to discuss and make some presentations about the veil in architecture, because I think it's an interesting theme. Now you see the plan is lyrical, is dynamic, is has plasticity. It is interesting. And you'll see it's very different from the other cube, so-called cube, that she did in Mexico, in Guadalajara. Taller than this one. Okay, so this is cube 1. Now cube 2, tower in Guadalajara. You see, you compare this one to this one. You can tell it's the same author, but the building is actually very different. But you can tell here that also there is this tension between opacity and transparency, between expansion and retraction. So you could say between extroversion and introversion. Much taller. So you see what buildings are in. You will never see such buildings in the movies made in Hollywood about Mexico. No, we only see poverty and drugs and killings. But it's a sophisticated country, and in some parts with truly very developed. I mean, really, the United States is ridiculous building that wall to protect itself from what? From these people? Maybe one day it will be, the immigration will take place in the opposite direction, maybe. Who knows? Even Tadawando built, I know 2 buildings by him in Mexico. One of them not really glorious, but anyway, Tadawando. Now, the University of Economics and Business in Vienna, which was not built yet. I don't know what is the status of this project. Now this is the, so I mentioned that she did a market. It's actually a restoration, but it's more than a restoration. You see, they work for 8 years. I mean, she worked for 8 years. So it was a transformation, a metamorphosis of the market. And you can see her architectural language, where you have this dynamic dichotomy, almost this tension between two differently sloping planes. So it is cultural, it is dynamic, it is, it has vitality, plastic vitality, the building. And please recall this image because we'll arrive at the market in an almost identical context that Benedetta Tagliabue built. Of the two architects, I think Carme Pinos, if I am to compare them, I think Carme Pinos is more, how to put it, in a way more vigorous and vivacity has, Benedetta has vivacity too, but very different. We'll arrive there soon. She is no doubt a proud woman. You could almost say that she's ready to confront the bull. I imagine she suffered when Eric Miralles, I imagine he left her. Anyway, here they are again, young, maybe almost out of the architecture school. She does also, I don't know why I have this picture here. She does also interior design, and we'll see some pictures with designs done by her. Now, this Cube 2, which we saw pictures of before, and there are other skyscrapers or tall buildings being built in the vicinity of her building.
Yeah.
Hello? I still hear some. If it is running water, I don't know where that noise comes from. Anyway, it's not too disturbing, but it would be better if it could disappear into silence. So, Guadalajara. We saw this already. I'm not insisting. Here you see the plans. They are very interesting. I mean, if we judge them artistically, they are good graphic works, but they are plans of a real building, which was also built. Here is at the beginning of the construction of her tower. So you can see on the site plan, her building stands out. It doesn't have a big footprint, but it's special in terms of its architecture. Now, a single family house, she did something like this too, also alone or by herself. It's not bad. Concrete, but not only concrete. And you see again the schematic design. I think it's elegant and it's powerful and it's vigorous. It's a good building. Now, I don't know, I should show this. Anyway, here are some, shelving systems that she designed, but I don't think they are in this house. Again, the interiors of her houses are, they somehow, they are a little bit more common than what I see outside. But anyway, now this is an interesting building, the Zaragoza Arquitectura Caixa Forum is a building for gatherings. I don't know if cultural or dedicated to business. This is the building, and I don't think it's bad. It's, it has vitality, and the geometry offers surprises in terms of, plastic presence. it's cultural, you know, maybe Marcel Breuer would have liked it too, considering that he designed the Whitney Museum in New York, which has something a little bit in common with this building. But here the cantilever part is, you know, almost dramatic. It's a good building, and it also has some attempt at some form of ornamentation, considering that the facade is not blank, but it has a you know, a design, a bidimensional design as well. And at night, even more so. I imagine the building was designed in this way to become, you know, some kind of a screen or a three-dimensional screen for, you know, all kinds of displays. I mean, those who are skeptical about the power of architecture to influence life, even emotionally, I think are wrong. Uh, you know, and I take issue with Peter Zumthor, who declared that he lost a long time ago the belief that architecture can change anything or better life and so on. I don't think it's true. And I don't think he was honest when he made this statement, because if he was honest, he would have stopped building. Why continue to build if you don't believe that you can, you know, attempt at least to better a little bit life and to transform, why not, society for the better. Now, this is a summer house designed by her, also in Mexico. This is more domestic, but the plan is interesting, and it is dynamic. I think we are approaching the last project. Yes, the Catalan government headquarters in Tortosa, Spain. I didn't know, I mean, recently I discovered this work of hers. It's a good work. I didn't know that the Catalan government had a headquarters in this town. It looks like more like a town than a big city, but I could be wrong. I don't know. Now, it's very interesting. This is just a detail of the picture. Of course, her building is on the right, but look at what is, you know, across the, you know, let's call it street. And I like this. I like the fact that the government of Catalonia, you know, built its headquarters in a, you know, in a context that is not glorious. It asserts its modernity, it asserts its progressive outlook on life and governing, but is part of society, and not part of the glamorous society, but part of, you see yourselves. I mean, here are obviously, you know, poor people, you know, common people, and this is good, I think. You know, I mean, who would place the headquarters of a government in such a context? Yes, this is almost an illicit, but not an illicit. They tried to obtain their independence. They didn't succeed, but, you know, yes, it is the government of Catalonia, but it's part of Spain. It's like a small headquarters, but I like the fact that it's part of a context that is not you know, politically cleaned up and demagogically, you know, proclaiming falsity. No, I like this very much. And I don't know actually if there are headquarters of anything actually in such a context. Forget about, you know, government's headquarters. And we are talking about an important part of Europe, Catalonia, and a part of Europe that is not without economic power. I think she did an excellent job here. You know, if you look at this building, you say here the government is serving the people. Yes, it is distinct. It is a headquarter, but it's not separated from people, from society, even from those in lower positions within the society. And you see, again, architecture can express values that transcend, you know, simple readings and are important for life. Because I think this town is embracing, in a way, and defending its nucleus. It's what this building represents. It's almost defending it. This is the jewel in the box. It's the headquarter of the government that I imagine all these people are you know, proudly Catalan, and it's nice. Now the facade resembles, you know, a lot the building in Vienna. Well, you know, architects sometimes repeat themselves. You know, even some of the biggest names did so. For example, Frank Lloyd Wright, he designed the Guggenheim Museum, and you would say that that was a unique building, but he had a project for a very similar building done for an observatory, except that, you know, it was, the spiraling took place upside down, so to speak. But if you took that project and rotated it, you got the Guggenheim. And there are other examples where you see, even in because I talked about Frank Lloyd Wright, in his Broadacre City, you know, he placed almost without shame, if I'm allowed to say so, his price tower was there in the landscape, and he even placed his projected cathedral for 1 million people in New York City, which in fact became a synagogue when built. So architects do this sort of thing, and in a way, we are, sorry to say it, a little bit pathetic. You know, we are children, and we are many times we have vanity. You know, we would like to cover the whole world with our buildings. Frank Le Corbusier, so when he built Le Cabanon in the south of France, you would say beautiful little hut for you know, his wife, for both of them. But I read that he actually wanted to create them, to multiply them, to make them you know, mass produced for as many people as possible, I imagine. So yeah, it's hard to get rid of this side of the architect, you know, to recognize his or her limits, and to, you know, it's probably embedded in the very essence of being an architect, to want to somehow cover the whole world with your work, even if that would mean to repeat yourself maybe significantly. Anyway, this is a good building. I like it. It's modern. It's dynamic. It has sloping walls here and there. It has angular idiosyncrasies. It's a modern, so-called modern building in a context that is not modern at all. And you see the plans. Kind of interesting that she places the serving spaces towards the outside, and you know, the larger spaces kind of towards the inner. Well, it's not really a courtyard, but you kind of expect it the other way, to have the big spaces towards the street, and then towards the inside to have the so-called serving spaces. But that's not what she did. Interesting. But in this way, I guess she justifies the fragmentation of those two main facades, maybe. Okay, some design, and then we'll occupy ourselves a little bit with, I mean, more than a little bit with Benedetta Tagliabue. So she designed many things. And a bench from 2006, exterior bench, restaurant table in that Caixa Forum, that building that we saw. I guess just the table, not the chairs. And you see the ideogram, if I can call it so, or the graphic, symbol of the table in the left, on the left side of the picture. Here again, you see the little sketch. It's a graphic representation in a way of the essence of the object or the building that she built or built. Trolley, bar trolley, again for that building, the Caixa Forum. A bench also for the same building. A table in progress, kind of interesting, table in progress, but I see it's done. Maybe the building, no, it's not in progress because we saw the building was built. Anyway, maybe it's in the progress to receive food on it, I don't know. A desk from 2013. Now, Benedetta Tagliabue. Here I will have a digression a little bit because there is a subject that is very dear to me, and I hope I will not bore you with it because I mentioned this before. It's about weaving, architecture and weaving, and this became almost an obsession with me, and that's not good. Obsessions are not good in general. This is her website. As you can see, the name of Miralles is still there, although he died almost 20 years ago. So she kept his name, and I imagine this saddens very much Carme Pinos, but what could she do about it? I know someone who works in, and I wanted to invite her to, because I decided, just one day ago to make this presentation. I didn't want to rush, but I regret in a way, because Elena Nedelcu, she's an important person in her office, almost like an associate partner, and I exchanged some emails with her. I could have invited her to tell us something. Maybe at another occasion, we'll dedicate a whole presentation just to her, to tell her about what they work on and more about this important architecture office. So this is Benedetta, kind of a different lady, different woman than Carme Pinos. She can be extravagant, a little more extravagant than Carme Pinos, I think. She also is a little younger. So she's Italian. She is not Spanish. She's not Catalan. She was not born in Spain. She rides a bicycle, which is nice, with plastic shoes, I imagine. That's also very nice. Now, I don't know about the sculpture on her left side, but on her left hand, but, she's a popular, almost pop figure to an extent. She's also a member of the Pritzker Prize jury, which is not a little thing. And she was for a couple of years already. Okay, so she has a son, well, their son, Eric Miralles, and hers, and I think he's also involved in her practice. He's grown up now, and they have a beautiful apartment where also the office is, and we'll see some pictures of that. But you see already there is a sweetness decorative, ornamental sweetness here that we would not have seen it in the case of Carme Pinos. She's a different kind of person than Carme Pinos, and her architecture is different. But anyway, the apartment, again, you can see the value of ornamental work, even the treatment of the wall in her apartment. Now, this work I think is exceptional, and I imagine it was considered exceptional, but I don't know if it was analyzed sufficiently in terms of its meaning, because it is an entirely woven work. And as you can see, she won the competition for the Pavilion of Spain, and Enric Miralles was already, was not alive any longer, so this is entirely her work. And a very courageous proposal, and she won, and it was built. And I don't know if she was aware of Gottfried Semper's theory, and maybe it's even better if she wasn't, but the similarity to what she did and what he said in his theory is striking. Now, because you see the word architect in 1550s from Middle French architect, from Latin architectus,
okay,
from Greek architekton, master builder, director of works, from archi, which means chief. And we use the first letters of the word architect or architecture continuously. But I think we forget the second part of the word, which is tekton. And yes, it has this meaning, builder and carpenter, but it actually originates in texture, and it has to do with weaving. So it's interesting, this word architect or architecture has two halves in a way. The first one, which is related to the meaning of being a chief, and that's why all the business cards in the world of architects mention ARH or ARCH and so on, and then the name. But the neglected half, the second half, is actually, I think, more important, and is the road not taken linguistically, so to speak. So texture, or texture, early 15th century, network, structure, from Middle French texture, and directly from Latin textura, web, texture, structure, from stem of texere, which means to weave, from the Proto-Indo-European root tex, to weave, to fabricate, to make wicker or wattle framework. So that's exactly what she did in this building. It's a building almost illustrating what we just read here. And a short intermezzo into, again, Gottfried Semper, because he was the one who first mentioned that the first architectural gesture was actually weaving. And I said it before, and I will repeat again, and if some of you already heard me saying it, I apologize that I repeat, but I think it's important to say it again. Gottfried Semper asked himself, how did the first house come into being? And he said, some fishermen and hunters gathered around the fire. They understood that the fire needed to be protected. They didn't yet have a house. So they used some vegetable material, branches of bushes and whatever they had around themselves. And by weaving, they created some vertical enclosures to protect the fire. And then they built a platform to elevate a little bit the fire from the earth, so the animals and the flooding would not affect the fire. And then, of course, first was the hearth, and then the enclosure, which was woven, and then came the roofing. And so this was Gottfried Semper, an important architect and theoretician in 19th century, German. The four elements of architecture that he mentioned, the hearth, That's where the fire was and is, the roof, the enclosure, which is oven, and the mount. So the hearth, meaning metallurgy and ceramics, because it has to do with fire, the roof with wood, carpentry, the enclosure, textile, weaving, and again, Semper thought that this was the first one that was done because the huntermen and the fishermen couldn't do the roof so easily. For the roof, they needed, stronger materials and the things close at hand were the bushes, the plants, whatever they found to weave vertical enclosures. And the mount is the earthwork. So I think it's very interesting, this understanding of how the first house came into being and the importance of weaving or textile. And you see here a page from his book, The Origins of Each Element Can Be Found in the Traditional Crafts of Ancient Society. Hearth, fire, ceramics, roof, carpentry, enclosure, weaving, and the mount, which is stone masonry. So this is from his book, The Four Elements of Architecture from 1851. And this was his adversary. And I always talk, when I talk about Semper, I talk also about Abbé Laugier. This page belongs to Abbé Laugier. And I consider the conception of Abbé Laugier representing the masculinist understanding of the beginning of architecture, while the Semper's theory I consider to be the feminist counterpart. What Abbé Laugier thought in the 18th century, so not 19th, was a little earlier than Semper, was that the first house was based on columns and then beams and then the roofing. In other words, there was nothing woven here. There were no woven materials. It was just structure. And it's a theory that is based on structure and not so much on the flexibility or the almost the fluidity that weaving means. So I think it's very interesting to compare Abbé Laugier with Semper. And I think Semper has an additional significance for us today when we try to soften a little bit the predominance or the firstness of structure in its dialectics with maybe what we call ornament. Okay, now, because I like sometimes to refer to, and this is a subject that almost requires it, I will mention the goddesses of weaving, because in mythology, there are no gods of weaving, there are just goddesses of weaving. And you'll see them very quickly. Ishtar, here she is from the Mesopotamian culture. It's very interesting that in mythology, women are those. And that's why I said Semper's theory is kind of feminine. It promotes, in a way, if I can say so, maybe a little bit inappropriately, some kind of a feminist reading or understanding of the beginning of architecture. So Ishtar had other attributes, of course, Ishtar. She was also the goddess of fertility and the goddess of war and the goddess of love, but also she was the goddess of weaving. Then Lilith is very interesting because Lilith apparently is the woman prior to Eve, and in this painting by Michelangelo, the snake becomes a woman, and it is the woman who gives the apple to Eve. And yes, in Christian theology, she's evil. But the truth of the matter is, if we compare Eva with Lilith, who is Lilith? Lilith is the woman prior to Eva, is the undomesticated woman, is certainly the woman who refuses to be considered born from Adam's bone. And I think it's very humiliating. I'm not a woman, but I think it's very humiliating to women to be almost some kind of second-class citizens, because Christian theology depicts them as being born from the bone of man, from the bone of Adam. I don't think Adam would have liked to know that he was born from the bone of Eva. So from the very beginning, I think the patriarchal view of life and existence is so evident, is so ostentatious, you know. So again, Eva is the domesticated woman, the woman who has to accept her role as being born almost like an afterthought from the bone of Adam. But Lilith, the wild woman, who symbolizes nature in all its grandeur and its majesty, and sometimes in its terror, is the primordial woman, and she was also connected with weaving. Now we arrive at Neith. I don't know if I pronounce well. In Egypt mythology, she was also a goddess of weaving. They move me very much, these goddesses, and you see, you know, in different cultures, the woman is the goddess of weaving. Now, Arachne is very dear to me, and I can tell you why. She was not a goddess; she was a mortal woman who was she was a very good weaver. But Athena, who was a goddess, provoked her to a duel. Who weaves better? And Arachne won, and because she won, Athena punished her and transformed her into a spider. It's a very interesting story here, and I really think this matter needs to be further studied, because if I don't know if you know, Athena sprang from the head of Zeus, just like, so she didn't have a mother, just as Jesus didn't have a father. I mean, you know, he had a so-called celestial father, but you know, we can talk about that. In Zeus, in Athena's case, she sprang from the head of Zeus without a mother, and she sprang already armed. And I think patriarchal mentality was born there. It was born with Athena, who was born from the head of Zeus, a man, and she was already armed. And she was the goddess of war, and she was aggressive. Now, yes, she's also considered the wise goddess. Arachne, on the other hand, the mortal woman who was very talented at weaving, she was transformed into a spider. And Carl Jung talks about the terror of the spider, that psychologically the spider represents for us in a way the psychological shadow. We are uncomfortable vis-a-vis the spider. The spider makes us uncomfortable. So I think Arachne, psychologically speaking, represents the road not taken, that side of our psyche which is unexplored and maybe even unexplorable, maybe, I don't know, but which makes us uncomfortable because we grew up with a mentality that was governed by the winner. And the winner was Zeus through his accomplice, Athena. Arachne, though, was a weaver, and she is represented in this engraving by Gustave Doré. You see her as a spider. And Dante, and you know, visiting his, contemplating Arachne, being punished by Athena, being punished because she represented a truth which the patriarch Zeus couldn't accept through his accomplice, that is Athena. Because apparently, from what I read, this is what the myth says, in her weaving, Arachne also depicted some narrations of the infidelities of Zeus and so on. Anyway, Frigg, this is the Scandinavian goddess of weaving. Yes, weaving all right, obviously, in the north. And Durga, the Hindu goddess of weaving. So again, we have weaving and goddesses of weaving. We have these primordial goddesses in almost all cultures, or anyway, in cultures so very different, one from the other. I find it a fascinating subject, and you know, it deserves much more attention than I was able to have and to convey. But coming back to Benedetta Tagliabue, this is a woven building, and as such, I find it very, very striking. And I'm amazed that it was built. I'm amazed that she won the competition. I'm amazed of everything. I mean, this is literal weaving. You know, they did these mats in China, and then they imported them to Spain. And anyway, well, no, they didn't import. I think the exhibition was in Spain, in China. No. Anyway, interesting work. And it shows clearly that Benedetta was and is capable of very courageous design decisions. But it is proven again and again that if you risk, you could win. And if you don't risk, you lose for sure. So some risk is involved in you know, in big wins, if we can call it so, a big win. And it is a big win to build a pavilion of Spain for a major, you know, world exhibition. It is a big win. But you'll see in other works as well, Benedetta is very concerned with weaving. This is not the only building, but here weaving takes explicit forms. Okay. Anyway, this is the built work and the modeling, the digital modeling. It is a certain problem here, as you notice it. You know, the ending at the top part of the building is kind of abrupt. It is horizontal. It is a cut. But the same thing happens to the Dragon building built by Daniel Lipskind in Milano, which is also very interesting from the eye level. But I think it's not easy actually to create the top part of the building less artificially than it is done here. I don't know. Now, I show you some, just some studies by the way of weaving of Shakira Hamad, the young architect who is now in New York, done with Maya for a project she did. And unfortunately, I don't have the whole project here. A tattoo academy in Australia, but it's also about basketry in a way. Basketry, yes. She did a very interesting project, and I don't know why I don't have the whole project here, but you'll see some drawings, some of the studies having to do with weaving that she did for this work. So these were done with Maya. You could say this is not yet architecture. It's not, but it's pointing towards something that is perhaps interesting to maybe even possible to arrive at. A woven building. Here again, weaving is a little bit too explicit, but I like the drawings. I like this you know, the preoccupation with this theme. Hard to do this using the T-square and the rectangle. It's also in a way in the act of weaving. I mean, I can talk forever about this subject, because here is also the complexities of that weaving. Here I could bring into the discussion Adolf Loos. I could bring into the discussion ornament. I could bring in the discussion tattooing. I could bring in the discussion many things. The labyrinth even. It's a different kind of life and a different kind of living, and a different kind of doing architecture, by weaving. And we don't weave these days sufficiently, I think. In terms of linguistics, we still use like urban tissue, or but essentially we are still obsessed with structure and again structure, meaning Abel Ogier and not Gottfried Semper. This is an image from her office, another image from her office doing models. Here she is. She seems to be happy. She has a nice library. They loved books, both Eric Miralles and they love books. They have many books. A luminous, nice office, maybe too luminous to work to work with computers, but I guess maybe it's possible. So I like, in a way, this office where the domesticity of so-called domestic life mingles with the office work. As Jean Nouvel said, bring the office into the home and the home into the office. I think this intertwining and intermingling could be fruitful and positive. Sorry, these are two of her works, but we'll come back to them. Now, there was an interview with her, she was asked, in looking at your design values, who or what has been the biggest influence on your work as an architect? She says, well, of course, I always say that the biggest influence is my husband. Well, at that time, I don't know if he was still alive. He was, so he was not. He was a person looking everywhere. I think I have the same attitude of being very curious about the works of others, but also curious about what artists do, or what other types of professions do, and what can be discovered through films. I think this may be the type of influence we can imagine in our work more broadly. Here they are, I don't know if at this time they were yet married. Now, a remarkable building and a political building, and here we are not dealing with a, almost a shadow government, like unfortunately the Catalan government is forced into, the periphery in a way. But with the Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh, they won the competition, and she completed the building by herself. And just this is amazing, that her husband died, and she was able to carry on this extremely complex and ambitious and unique and provocative and idiosyncratic project by herself. I think it is amazing, because this is almost the antithesis of a governmental building. And I take my hat off for the government of Scotland for building such a building, such an unconventional building, a building that doesn't proclaim, I am the authority, I am on the pedestal, I represent power, I take decisions. No, this is a building that opens up to the city and welcomes democracy, welcomes participation, invites participation, even conflict. And I think it's a lesson in democracy that other governments should consider. I mean, there are many interesting things here, and I imagine she had difficulties because, I mean, look at the idiosyncratic facades. Look at these, look at these bow windows, or I don't know, these alcoves, they are incredible. They are like nests emerging from the facade of the building, each one a little bit different. and we'll see also pictures from the inside. Um, I mean, what government would easily accept something like this? And I imagine it was a very expensive building. And you'll see inside. Now here is a window, you know, with a worker himself wondering, what am I doing here? You know, these architects kill me. Yeah, look, this is how it is inside. So I guess, you know, there is a place for, you know, one of the officials, so to speak, you know, sitting and having maybe some books on those shelves and, you know, to read, you know, in this very special place. Very interesting, no? I mean, I never saw something like this before nor after. Again, you have architects who are a little bit crazy almost, but it's beautiful to be like this because this creates variety and the excitement, and you are incited to dream and to yeah, to defy conventions. Yes, the government of Scotland paid for this extravaganza, but it's okay. You see, otherwise ordinary room, you know, it would have been a banal room, but because of that thing, it becomes special. And she handled very well also the large spaces. I mean, this is the, you know, the assembly hall, which is very well done. Really, this was a major work and a complex work, a difficult work. And she had to work without Eric. They won the competition together, but she had to move on building it. And I don't think I could have done it. She did it. This shows clearly character and force and devotion and passion, intensity. I mean, look at the skylights, you know. Because I'm absolutely sure the project they won the competition with didn't have so many details that were necessary afterwards. And, so I think this was in a way the highest and the most beautiful homage she could have addressed to her husband, you know, to complete the work that they imagined together. Bravo to her, bravo to them. But firstly, bravo to her. Now here we have the Prime Minister of Scotland on the left, and of course the Queen of England. Interesting picture, nice picture. Okay, back to architecture. It's a unique building, and it is unique, as these things are unique. They're incredible, you know. And the capriciousness of you know, an ornamental attitude is acceptable even in a governmental building. You know, that playfulness that we mentioned yesterday, because it is playfulness here. Maybe you know, a little bit idiosyncratic, but it's okay. I mean, who would have thought that this is the elevation of a building for the Parliament of Scotland, you know, Scottish Parliament? Incredible. Bravo to them. I really like this very much, because when power, political power, becomes also creative and playful, beautiful things happen, I think. I like to think. This is a great room to take decisions in, you know, of importance for the country, for the nation. Now we see campus School of Management in Shanghai progress. I don't know about this one if it's so great, but it's just a project. I don't think it developed. I don't know. Now we see a tower in also in China in progress. I prepared this presentation 1 or 2 years ago, so maybe in the meantime the building became more than just a project. So she has many projects now. This is a social housing in Madrid, maybe less interesting, but you know, it's social housing. Although there are social housing projects that are very innovative, very interesting. This one doesn't seem so interesting to me, but maybe it is. I only have this picture. Then the Diagonal Mar Park in Barcelona, which I imagine was initially was initiated together with her husband, and then she built it just in the case with a building in Edinburgh. Here we also have these snakes of steel, you know, problematizing space, but dynamically and interestingly. And then you also have some ceramic work, which is also kind of an homage to Gaudi. It's good. A little less dramatic and less threatening than what we saw that Miralles did with Carme Pinos for the Olympic Village. This one is more playful and less aggressive, but it's still interesting. Now we arrive at the market that I mentioned. It's so very different from the one built by Carme Pinos. And you'll see now it's in construction. This is a drawing of the top, I mean a top view. And again, you see some kind of weaving and chromatic weaving as well. This is a fragment of the built work. So this is the roofing. The plan, I like the plan. It's neurotical, is interesting, you know, is medieval almost, but with a modern neurosis. And you can tell that this is the work of someone who was also involved in Edinburgh. And it's amazing that, you know, she did it again. I like the plan very much. It's almost my soul, you know, tormented. I even like the way it is drawn, the plan. You know, I mean, I used to do this sometimes to the exasperation of my professors, you know, but it's the easiest way actually to draw elevations. You know, you just extrude them, so to speak, from the plan on four sides. Somebody told me this is the Chinese way. I don't know if it's the Chinese way. Anyway, I like this fragment. I would put it on the wall. It's a nice graphic work, but it's actually a plan, a rigorous plan of a built work. And it looks good too, especially the other facade or elevation, because here is the old elevation, but the roofing is interesting. So the people in the blocks of flats around the market enjoy themselves when they, you know, I don't know if there are too many balconies, but looking through the window, they see colors and they see some kind of abstracted fruits and vegetables. In a way, it connects with the work of MVRDV in Rotterdam, but except that here, what they have there inside, she has here outside, and you know, it's different. But again, joie de vivre in a way, you know, and colors and fruits and vegetables, abstracted, of course, in this case. But the other elevation you'll see is dramatic and is interesting, even here. But the old building is as it is anyway. It is clear when you live creatively and you are lucky to be appreciated and to receive commissions, and you push the limits, you know, push the envelope, break the envelope even, then something sometimes nice happens. It's even the interior is nice, you know. It's in a way I'm almost sad that they sell salamis there, and it's not some kind of, I don't know, almost you know, religious building of some sort. But on the other hand, why not have the profane married with something different? Now, this is the other facade or elevation that I told, I mentioned. Um, it's interesting, you know, it's playful, it is fragmented, it is fractal almost. And it's just a market after all, you know, it's not the opera in Sydney. But all for the better, I think. Why not have markets that are architecturally also significant, at least to an extent? So there is drama, of course, there is, it has cultural qualities, the building. Okay, now capitalist building. Actually, I wonder, you know, what they felt when they worked for this, you know, the gas natural office building. It's a building that from the start was, you know, kind of a little bit questionable because, you know, I mean, you imagine gas natural office, but they were able to show the rebelliousness. And I imagine it's not easy, you know, and to avoid, not totally, but they avoided it because she began this work with her husband. They avoided the traps that commercial, you know, building like this one would have been almost unavoidable. I mean, you see, it's a glass box more or less. You have the big cantilevered, you know, part of the building, and the other one is kind of banal. But then, what is happening with that? That I don't know how to call it. That thing, I call it the thing on the lower left part, which is I would say represents the antagonistic side or the rebellious side or the yeah the opposing, because I imagine both Miralles and particularly perhaps Miralles, but also Benedetta probably they do not appreciate very much hardcore capitalism and you know this you know extracting you know this obsession with gas. But you see this strange addition or how to call it. I can't find the word now in English. I know a word in a different language, but not in English. It brings surrealism into a building which otherwise is pure commerce. And it's the betrayal, in other words. So yeah, I think it's interesting. The plan again interesting, you know. It's the same architect who did the market and who did the parliament in Edinburgh. But this thing that springs towards the right is interesting to comment on. You know, is their I see it as their opposition to the very program they were actually serving. Otherwise, you know, it's a building like there are many in the world, but there is that thing that, which is a little bit agitating in the good sense of the word. It's very hard now for to build for a gas company something that is exceptional because they expect you know a commercially viable building that expresses power and you know not you know dissent. But they express dissent here, and I'm thinking of the paintings of Goya. Goya has some paintings where he depicts the royal family, and in the background, kind of in the shadow, you see the painter. And the painter actually makes fun of the royal family, depicts them not in a flattering way, but also not sufficiently irritating, so he wouldn't be, you know, sent to prison. But you feel that there is dissent and irony and sarcasm even in the painting. The same here, because of this strange thing. I don't know what function it has. I mean, I guess, going back to the plan, they represent this represents, I think, the dissent. I don't know if I interpret correctly, but that's what I think and feel. Now it's a metro station, and this is where the person I know, she worked on, and she's, I think, project manager within the office. They won a big competition. I think Kengo Kuma is another winner here. It's, of course, this Kengo Kuma is everywhere. In fact, yesterday or the day before yesterday, I received an Arch Daily newsletter where he is showing a chicken coop, co-op, you know, like a kind of a social housing for chicken. I think is ridiculous. This Kengo Kuma is ridiculous sometimes, you know, and I'm talking about a major architect I know, but I think sometimes he is ridiculous. I mean, this thing to build for chicken or you know, social housing, as he puts it, and very rationalistic, is, I think it's almost grotesque. I think that chicken should be left alone without, you know, imposing on them so-called Pritzker architecture. Now, he didn't get a Pritzker prize, but, you know, I don't think chicken need, you know, anyway. So this is the project for this subway station that they won. I don't know who that lady is. It's not Benedetta, but I can see some kind of approximation of the profile of this lady in the plan. And they won. And they also used this, you know, puzzle because it is the people who live around there they have a certain ethnicity. You know, many come from Africa, and so they try to somehow connect with the people who live there. And I think this is a legitimate way to do it, to somehow connect at this level of, you know, to express somehow of the ethnicity of the people who live in that area. So there is a collage. I understood that she worked for this project, at least in this way, with inspirations from crafts and, you know, the culture of the people who immigrated to France from other places. It's a big subway station with an interior maybe not totally removed from you know, the spatial entries of Piranesi. Maybe the plan doesn't show this very well, but maybe the perspectives will. It's a big project, and they won, and they are building it. Maybe it's already built by now, as you can see. Now, the people that I see here in the subway station are not really those connected with that ethnicity that I mentioned, but maybe it was just a wrong representation. I don't know. That's what I read. In this area, people come from Africa, many of them. It's an interesting project, and they are building one also in Napoli, also big subway station. We'll see a project, the project also. So yes, you could start a project in this way, using fragments, you know, just scattered fragments of that somehow connect with the context, with the culture that you are trying to serve, even if apparently they have no connection with architecture per se. Now we see an exhibition in China in 2011, horticulture exhibition. I don't know if you know, and it's too bad I don't have here. I mean, I have somewhere in a PowerPoint presentation. Jean Nouvel also did a park in Barcelona. It's kind of interesting to compare his park with, well, this is not in Barcelona, but it's done by an architect based in Barcelona, but with, of course, with Parc Güell by Gaudí. This is also, and you see again some kind of basketry here, you know, that weaving. Maybe you know, it's not so-called sufficiently modern, or I don't know, but it's okay. It's just for an exhibition. I don't know if Eric Miralles would have agreed with this work, but it's okay. Now, the rector's office at Vigo University campus, less spectacular than the parliament in Edinburgh, but you know, I'm sure the budget was also very different, and the ambitions of the project. It's okay. But there is even here something interesting, you know, the breaking of the box at the upper level, and you know, the fragmentation, the variations, the little cubicles. It's almost like the village on top of the city, you know, at a micro scale. The inside is, you know, resolutely modern. Must be nice to work in her office. I read that it's something in between a school and an office that you can also. It has to do also with the questing for knowledge, and not just for the, you know, production, building. She tries to cultivate, you know, both a search for knowledge and a search for productivity, meaning generating projects. Now, an extension of youth music school, and this is actually called with his name, Miralles Hall. Very nice that her husband's name was given to a school. Maybe architecture is not so interesting, but at least inside, indoors. Now, this is a pavilion she built in Milano. I don't know if it's called Lavit. Again, it's some kind of weaving to an extent, but it is maybe, you know, almost like a woven Buckminster Fuller, a little bit strange, so to speak, especially at the top part is, I don't know. It is a ludic pavilion or a ludic work, but I don't know. There is geometry, there is basketry, there is wood. They're a little bit funny, but it seems to have a certain so-called ethnicity itself. This pavilion, or several. I see there are two at least. Yes, two. The red one that you see on the upper, I mean, you know, like northeast of these two, is the one by Daniel Lipskin that I mentioned, the dragon that was done for China, and looks very nice from the eye level if you are walking by. But from here, from the top, you can see the flat roofing that I think is problematic. But because it's almost like a decapitated dragon, you know, it's not a full dragon, and you can see the the fatality of reason in a way. You flatten up the dragon, you sever its head, and it's a problem. At least Benedetta Tagliabue doesn't do that, you know. Quite the opposite. The heads of her pavilions are flourishing, so to speak, maybe too much. Anyway, but you can still take interesting pictures inside. This almost reminds me of the some kind of a graphic work that Bernard Tschumi generated. You know, Bernard Tschumi was asked which is the best architecture. He said the best architecture is fireworks, and he orchestrated some sophisticated fireworks, you know, based on a certain musical score and using you know, high technology and so on. Anyway, yeah. Isn't it curious that an architect says the best architecture is fireworks? But Tschumi made other statements like this, you know, meant to provoke. So these are the plans. There are actually two pavilions brought together. Little jewels in a way. I don't know. I mean, here the almost the malicious architect would have some comments to make, not very positive, you know, because anyway, I will not insist on this. But I like the interior, though, although it shows some agitation, but it's interesting. Now, this is the underground central station that I mentioned in Naples, Napoli, which is being built, is this one. Now, this is a cathedral, all right, almost. You know, it's dramatic, it's monumental. It's I don't know if she will build it or not. And now a tower in China again, which is which when I prepared the, in fact, you saw a picture of this, and I don't know if it was built or is being built, but will arrive at another work which is being built in China, which is very interesting. This is a tower, you know. I don't know if she's very convincing with these towers, but it's hard. Another tower in Taiwan. You know, if you make a name for yourself, as she did, together with her husband and then by herself, of course, then you are flooded with all kinds of commissions. I don't know now after the pandemic. I mean, what am I saying after the pandemic is still on? Unfortunately, in the United States, I read today that you know the new cases are increasing dramatically, are spiking. Of course, they are spiking because they are naive. You know, they saw that they got rid of the virus and they didn't. Like 50,000 new cases in one day. And younger people. This is not a joke. So she has a whole theory here. She was inspired by some traditional festivals. I don't know if this is reflected so well in the project, but that was her inspiration. Yeah, it's being built. Okay, now this is the work I wanted to arrive at it rather quicker than later. It's an interesting museum that she builds for a famous artist, the Picasso of China, whose name is probably Zhang Da Qian. I probably pronounce terribly. And it's like a little village almost. It's interesting on top of a hill. Look at the plan. Quite large. I mean, Picasso didn't have such a chance, you know, to have such a big building built for him. And it's interesting. The plan is interesting, and this connection between the buildings The pavilions are, you know, to be found frequently in Chinese architecture, contemporary architecture, model, and you'll see some pictures with a building already, you know, in an advanced stage of development. Here it is. These Chinese, they build anything, really. I read an architect in England said, we cannot do this sort of thing in England. No developer would accept almost anything. In China, it seems, you know, they would build anything, you know. It's like I don't know, very interesting. They have no inhibitions, and they had, maybe they still have the money to build it. Otherwise, you know, the government is kind of protesting against the plethora of these extravagant buildings, you know, covering the sacred land of the Republic, of the People's Republic. Anyway, it is interesting. It's not her worst work, and we are anxiously waiting to see it done, finalized. I don't know if I have pictures here with some artworks by Picasso, the Chinese Picasso. I think I saw somewhere, you know, but I don't know if I have them here. Anyway, we have pictures with a building. Yeah, you can see one of the artworks, so quite big on the right side. A very different kind of so-called Picasso. Anyway, okay, we move forward. We are approaching the end of this presentation, but there is one last work that I will show. A stage design for Merce Cunningham Ballet. As you know, probably Merce Cunningham was a very important, I think he died, a very important choreographer, kind of avant-garde. And he was, I learned only lately, he was married to John Cage, the great avant-garde composer. And he commissioned Benedetta Tagliabue to do a stage design for him. It moves me when I see this meeting between a very creative choreographer and the creative architect working together, and the collaboration between the arts is something beautiful, I think, when it happens. He is very old here, I mean old, you know, around 90. By the way, this year, Kenneth Renton, because we mentioned him the other day, will be 90, and if he will be in good health or so, I will invite him on his birthday to chat with us a little bit on his birthday. I think it's in November. We'll see. Anyway, this is Merce Cunningham, and these are the dancers. I love these artists, you know. And this is the stage design. This is the architect, you know, and it's beautiful when this happens, when this collaboration between the artists happen, and they have the means to develop and implement, you know, their work. Often this is not possible, but in this case it was possible because Merce Cunningham was a very successful choreographer, and he had the means to make this possible. Yeah, Stephen Hall also collaborated with a dancer. He even has some writings about it, and I like this. I like to have the chance to have the architect and the dancer or the choreographer work together. It's very beautiful. And yes, dance is dance. I mean, you know, maybe it was the first art form. Maybe something it was so. You know, and and look at them. They are magnificent. They are beautiful. They are alive. They are rhythmical. They are dancing. They are. I don't know. They give us hope. And then behind them, the structure by Benedetta Tagliabue, the dancer and the architect together. Thank you very much. I don't think I'll have the power to talk about Lina Bobardi now, but maybe I'll change.
Oh, it's good. It's good. I mean, it's a very massive body of work you presented.
Yeah, and I still feel I didn't do justice to, because these are ample practices and they have a lot of works. But I hope I was able to sketch at least what these two women architects do. Now,
Yes. Absolutely. Fantastic. Very good. Thank
It
you.
was very good, Dan. Thank you very much.
thank you. I don't know. I don't know who's talking. I have to.
It's Azar.
Pardon?
It's Azar.
Azar, thank you, Azar. You're always generous and sustainable. But how do I get? I know I have to stop the share. Although when I see little Richard, my God, I have to launch a competition, a house for little Richard. I love little Richard, the little father of rock and roll. So stop share, okay? And now, God, I'm spoiled. Still 8 people present besides me. I'm really very moved. Norbert was here from the very beginning, and I don't know who Norbert is. Maybe he will tell us where he's from. And Maria Agnes, I don't know who she is. I know the others. I know all the others with the exception of Norbert, and I think it was his voice previously. And Maria Agnes, maybe they will introduce themselves before we say goodbye to each other. Maybe we should know who we were, and are.
I just want to say that was a good presentation, Dan.
Thank you.
And I really enjoyed to see some works from Barcelona again. Reminds me the times that I live and study there. Was very nice.
Thank you. And, we are waiting for you to talk about Jose Luis Ser.
I will do a presentation.
Yeah, on 2 or 3 days from now, no? On the 1st of July.
Exactly.
I invited a lot of people from Harvard. I don't know if they will show up.
Pressure.
Well, the reason I invited them is because he was the dean at Harvard for 16 years. So
maybe I will be sick on that day.
Pardon?
Maybe I will be sick on that day.
I think you should be. Please talk with the god of sicknesses to give you some kind of a cold. I hope no one from Harvard is here, but Frank Lloyd Wright.
I'm kidding. I will do the presentation anyways. They are very far. They cannot criticize me that hard.
Exactly. No. I actually asked them. Of course, they always ignore my messages, but I thought that maybe they could invite some students to, say something about Jose Luis Ser, but I imagine nobody will respond in any way.
Okay. I was thinking about basing the presentation on one specific project and then talk about several others. But I will see what I can prepare from today until there.
Please, yeah, try your best. And then there is another architect that I will talk about, Piet Kramer from the School of Amsterdam, and maybe we'll see. Anyway, it will be the day to celebrate, to pay homage to 2 architects. Although this, Jose Luis Ser, I read on Wikipedia that he claimed that Le Corbusier invited him. I don't know. It sounds a little bit strange, that invited him to work for him, and then in parentheses, without pay. I know Le Corbusier was not paying his workers. I know this from Doshi, but at least in the case of Doshi, he didn't invite Doshi. Doshi invited himself to work for Le Corbusier. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see. So, do we want to say anything about these 2 important architects from Barcelona?
I like very much the analogy you did with Lilith and Eve. I don't know how much it really relates to these 2 women, but Lilith being the first wife of Adam, being cast out of the paradise, Yeah, I think, I mean, I like it in insofar as she was equally, to Adam, but she was not probably obeying God, being subservient to the man, and therefore she was cast out. And what's very interesting, she is not talked about in a way, right? She's sort of the unknown, unless you're like maybe busy with the Kabbalah or I don't know what. So in the same sense, I was not so much aware of Carmen Pinos and as the Lilith here, but what I can imagine, having my own practice together with Daliana, of course, and luckily I'm not having a second wife now or whatever, and I'm not planning